Hi there, everybody. It's Thursday afternoon, the 13th of August, and it's coming up to 2:45. And I just want to read you something really very quickly before I do it. Read the article. It's from the Financial Times. I'd just like to say really that I think really from now on, and certainly for quite some time, it's almost impossible to obtain the truth about what goes on in Ireland from our media sources, either from the national broadcasting, RTE that we have, either from the radio, RTE radio, or from the basic media, the newspaper media that's out there. And I think if you want to know what's going on in Ireland, what's going to happen in Ireland, you have to read external papers and magazines to find that out. Anyway, really what I want, I'll read this article here from, this is by the International Monetary Fund. I'm sure you've heard of it. And it's called The Luck of the Irish, and it was initially published on August the 10th, 3 days ago, and I only saw it yesterday in this newspaper. This is what it says. Pity Ireland. According to the International Monetary Fund, Ireland faces stresses greater than those of any other advanced country. Having ridden higher than most in the fat years, Ireland has been dropped into a deep, deep hole by the bust. But still, it is not time yet to write off the Celtic Tiger. Ireland's credit fuel boom was spectacular. Between 2002 and 2007, credit to private Irish borrowers nearly doubled. By 2007, houses were reckoned to be the most overvalued in Europe, and construction accounted for at least 1/5 of national output. Lacking its own free-floating currency to ease its adjustment, the bust is equally eye-catching. According to the International Monetary Fund, Ireland's output is expected to fall from its 2008 level by 13.5% by 2010, and wages will need to fall by 15% to restore national competitiveness. Even after 2 bouts of budget cuts, double-digit deficits are expected in 2009 and 2010. Then continues, the Irish banks, which delighted in property investment in the good times, have needed enormous public capital injections to prop them up. The government has since presented draft legislation for a bad bank, the National Asset Management Agency, which will buy land loans from the banks, bringing stability to their balance sheets by taking on unpriceable assets. This scheme is very poorly designed. If the NAMA makes a surplus from the purchases, the government will keep the money. But if it makes a loss, the government has said it will charge banks to make up the difference. The bad bank therefore does not cap bank losses, only their profits. This will hardly do much to quell the fears in private investors' hearts. The painful legacy of this crisis will be very long-lived. For one thing, the national debt will be very much higher. It would be foolish to confuse the crash of this particularly vicious cyclical downswing for a death knell. Ireland enjoys a good regulatory and tax regime. Its workers are well educated and its infrastructure is well developed. Those are amongst the most important reasons why it grew so consistently throughout the 1990s and early 2000s. Before the boom drove up wages and created distortions, Ireland was able to attract the waves of foreign direct investment. The next few years will be most harsh, and the burden of the adjustment will be borne by those least able to cope. Dealing with the fiscal crisis will mean it will be difficult to protect the country's most vulnerable people. But as the wreckage of the boom is washed away, older, safer sources of growth will have to be uncovered. that's the article. You can see where they're coming from. They're international capitalists, and it's not in their interest that anything's done to rock the boat. But when you read between the lines, you can see how dire the situation is for our country. Speak later. Bye.